So Beyond Code is a one-to-one interview with successful techies to inspire fellow developers to take the leap in their careers. We are in conversation with Gibson. We are looking forward to uncovering his adventurous journey of learning, opportunities, challenges, and mistakes. Hi, Gibson.
Hello. Hi.
Great to have you here. So for everyone in the audience, Gibson is an established Southeast Asia techie, and he had many successful stints at various organizations. Currently, he's the director of engineering at Mighty Jaxx. He's ran his own app and game dev company for close to a decade, and he's led the Southeast Asia engineering team of a very familiar unicorn that we'll get to later. So Gibson, one interesting thing that came up when we started off talking to you was that you've been a sailor. Right?
Yes, correct.
Yes. So I would love to know how your experience was as a sailor the whole 6 years.
Okay. So basically, my career was actually kind of unconventional. So what I did was that when I was in Polytechnic, I actually didn't really perform well in my studies. So one of the ways to actually get into university was actually paying my own way through university, and joining the Navy was actually one way that I actually could get a steady income and actually use it to actually pay for my university part-time, because my parents were actually not very rich, so they couldn't really afford my university education. So what I did was I signed on in the Navy for 6 years. Then from there, I saved a lot of money, and I did a lot of studying on my own to get to university. Then once I graduated from my university, which is SIM, that coincided with the end of my contract in the Republic of Singapore Navy. Then I decided to actually venture out into the tech industry.
Great. And one can say that life is quite like sailing, because you have to depend on the winds to take you where you really have to go. And that was engineering for you. So just wanted to know, as a young person, as a kid in school, did you always aspire to go to the Navy, or was it something that you came up later?
Okay, it was definitely something that came out later. When I was a kid, I was more interested in just basically doing a lot of like kid stuff, like playing computer games, which I was basically spending a lot of time with. I was spending so much time playing computer games that basically my studies actually kind of suffered, because it was just playing Nintendo games on Sega, PC games, everything. But then I had a very strong interest in computers and programming as a kid. But I did like just some minor programming during my younger days. Yes.
Right. So maybe that's why you're now working at Mighty Jaxx, which is a company that, I mean, I did go through your LinkedIn page and I saw that it's a phygital company, right?
Yes,
could you
correct.
explain to me and the audience what is meant by phygital?
I see. Okay, so phygital, basically we are trying to marry the concept of physical collectibles and digital. So what we have is like, we have actually things like we are creating concepts like multiverse and also NFT ticketings for some of the projects that we have. So we are actually trying to combine physical collectibles with the digital universe itself. So it could be like when you scan, we have this proprietary technology where you scan our collectibles, you can actually get an NFT and you can see inside your Mighty Jaxx user account. So these are the things that we are actually doing with Mighty Jaxx.
That's great. And it sounds really interesting to work for as well.
Yes.
So just wanted to know, so you're finishing your stint as a sailor and you're entering the industry of engineering. So how was your transition from a sailor to a developer?
Okay, basically from my sailor days to developer days, basically was like, I'll say like it's starting at square one again, but in a totally different industry. Because in the Navy, I was actually doing quite well. The pay was actually quite decent. And now I'm going to join the IT industry as a developer, as a junior developer at that. So there was not much experience that could be ported over, but I took it as as something that I need to learn too, and also something that I have to actually get used to in life, because I want to make information technology and programming as part of my career.
And that aspiration is something that every developer needs growing in their career.
Yes.
So I understand you said that there were a lot of hardships and starting from square one. And so how did you get yourself market ready in terms of getting that first interview or getting into the code writing and on everything? How did you learn those processes? What went into it?
Okay. So when I started my career, basically, there was no Stack Overflow, but there was internet and Google. But in terms of technology and programming, I'll say knowledge, there wasn't a lot. In fact, there was actually more programming knowledge in books. So basically, what I did was I shut myself in my room for 1 month. I just borrowed a whole bunch of programming books. That time I was learning how to do .NET. So I was basically just borrowed a bunch of programming books on .NET. Then I just stayed in my room for 1 month, just doing programming, learning from tutorials from cover to cover, doing my own sample programs to get a sense of how C# works. And then after that, when I felt that I was actually good enough to at a certain level, I went for my interviews.
That sounds like a real grind, and grinders make the best leaders as well. So as we move forward, you also ran your own company, and
yes.
So what was the motivation that went behind launching your first company, and what did you aim to solve with that company?
I see. Okay. So basically, after I left the Navy, I was working in an insurance company doing software using .NET. Then after a while, I felt that actually that kind of company structure, which is very corporate, wasn't really for me, right? I had to wear long sleeve shirts and pants, go to office, even though I was just doing programming. So I started to actually start my own company. So that coincided with the launch of the first iPhone worldwide. So the first iPhone came out. Then I was looking at, wow, this iPhone is very revolutionary. It touch screen, no buttons, and it allows you to create apps that you can download from the App Store itself without going through third-party providers. Because previously I was actually just using an old Nokia or Samsung phones, and those don't have very good apps. So I saw that as a very groundbreaking technology, and I saw that there will be demand for people that want to create apps for the iPhone, and later on will be Android. So that's how I started to just start my own company doing iPhone applications.
That's really nice.
Yes.
And so we went through the clients you worked with, and would love to hear the journey behind how you pitched and successfully closed such big clients like L'Oreal, Kiehl's, Changi Airport, and Lenovo.
Okay, so basically all those clients actually, when I started out, basically I was only a person doing the programming. And I think that I did a long time ago, people always tell me like, if you do good work, people will find you. You don't need to, that will be the best form of marketing. I thought that was actually nonsense. But actually I found that actually once I produce good enough work for small clients, they actually refer me to bigger clients, and they help spread my name around. And from there, those bigger companies actually contacted me out of the blue. They just say like, oh, I got your contact from a friend of mine or from an ex-colleague who actually recommended me to you, and we need to do an iPhone app, or we need to do a web application. Can you help us with that? So from there, I actually hired and grew my team to around 3 developers who are based in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine. So they were doing mostly the development. Then I was doing the project management and also some of the development. So that's how I grew my team, and so I got the big clients.
That's wonderful. Yes. Referrals really work, and
yes, definitely.
That's no joke. That's one quick way to get business. Right.
Yes, correct.
So you also worked as a CTO at a Better Florist. Now this was a transition, and now you were in a startup, right? A product catered startup. So how was your whole experience working as the CTO there?
Okay, so at that time, previously I was doing my own consultancy. So going from own consultancy to a CTO is actually kind of a big jump, because that time, now I'm going to CTO, my stakeholders are not my customers itself. My stakeholders are like my boss, my CEO, my product managers. So basically so the mindset has to change. So a lot of things I do is very close communication with my CEO. And because the team was actually very small, it's only like 5 or 6 people. So we learned a lot of things, like in terms of fast, how to produce things fast, how to deploy fast, and it was already very fast moving. And because my boss formerly was from Google, so he taught me a lot of things about SEO, SEM, optimization for Google, and also I learned from my product managers how to adopt a more product thinking mindset instead of just a technical mindset. Because previously I was just like, you tell me what to do, I'll do it for you. Whether it works or not, I'm not sure, but I just deliver what I want and what you need. That's it.
So this experience was opened you up to a more collaborative experience where you give and you take experiences from each other.
Correct.
Right. So, as you said, there was a big jump from your own consultancy to being a CTO of a company where you
Yes.
had multiple stakeholders.
Yes.
What are the major mistakes you believe that people make while handling technical initiatives and balancing business according to you?
Okay, I think especially for technical people, the first thing first, like when they are presented by when they presented a problem by the product managers or customer support, their first thing always think like, okay, I can write some code for that, or I can find a technical solution for that. But sometimes like some things when you want to develop it fast, you do not need to actually find a technical solution or do not need to actually write code. You can find different solutions. Like for example, you can find like maybe a way to automate some tools, like say like using Zapier to integrate forms with Google Sheets to store into a simple database instead of just coding a MySQL data, instead of coding a web app to store information into MySQL. Or maybe there's a way to achieve the kind of output that the client wants through a non-technical way instead of purely technical. So
So,
yes, yeah.
so you're
So
saying
basically,
that,
it's like
please, yes, go on. Sorry.
sorry. So I say that basically it's like for technical people, do not always assume that whatever you need to do and what you need to deliver has to be in a technical form. It could be some other ways. As long as you can achieve what the stakeholders want, that's good enough.
Right. All right. So as you moved from a better florist and already you had this experience of leading and managing multiple stakeholders, you started your stint as a head of engineering at dishdash.co.
Yes,
So
correct.
tell us something about dishdash.co and how your responsibilities changed there and what you learned there.
Okay, so at Jaxx, what the scope was actually bigger because I have to manage a team of developers for our web app and also our mobile app, which is Android and iOS. So it was native development. So I was actually in charge of actually getting developers, getting interns to work on those systems itself. So I was also heavily involved in the technical architecture and the development. And because our clients are much bigger scale and there's much more traffic, so I learned a lot on like architecture, on AWS scaling and all the various things like how to create RESTful APIs that actually work well with iOS and Android and also work well with the web app. So it was quite a good learning experience. I quite enjoyed my work at Jaxx because one thing is that my stakeholders came from a very product-driven mindset. So they taught me a lot about product thinking and how to actually structure my projects in order to make it as the best possible product for the stakeholders.
Right. So you probably made a strive towards gaining a more perfection-oriented way of doing things, where everything's catered to the client and the end user. Right. So after that, I believe you worked at Lenskart, which was the unicorn we were talking about earlier. Right.
Yes.
So how was managing the mobile engineering team in Singapore, and how did you come to this opportunity with working with a unicorn like Lenskart?
Oh, actually, I was that time at Jaxx, I was actually approached by a recruiter who actually told me that startup doing eyeglasses was actually opening up in Singapore, and they'll need someone in Singapore to start a development team in Singapore to help them expand in Southeast Asia. So I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. So I actually had an interview with my boss, my ex-boss, who was the chief digital officer in Singapore. Then I also had a final round discussion with the CTO of Lenskart in India. Then I found quite interesting on what they actually wanted to do and how they intend to expand in Southeast Asia, starting with Singapore as the base. Then I thought, okay, now this sounds like a good opportunity. Then I signed up for it.
That's great. And did you have fun at your stint there? Was it a learning experience?
Oh yes, actually it was a very lovely experience. I learned a lot from my bosses and my colleagues in Singapore, and also from my Indian colleagues also in Lenskart in India, because we had to have like almost daily conversations with them. I learned like how they actually manage such a big legacy system, from the ERP systems, from the website, mobile apps, and the way of thinking, and also it helped me with communicating with them on a very high level and low level.
Right. So from a conversation, I've gauged that you've worked with developers and engineering teams in various countries and continents for that matter. So how would you classify, an Indian developer, and how would you say that an Indian developer is, and how they should strive to be working with international teams?
Sorry, can you repeat your question again? I
Yeah.
didn't really hear you.
So since you've worked with such a variety of developers from different countries,
Yes.
what would you say to the Indian developer who's trying to work with a company that has international teams and working with international clients? What's your message to them?
Okay, I will say that first thing first, always try. Okay, because there was a lot of cross-cultural communication. So I think the best way to solve cross-cultural communication is basically just to hop into a call and then just talk to them rather than just using chat or Slack, that kind of thing. Because one thing I find best when communicating with my colleagues in actually Landscape is that once we have, let's say, once the conversation is like involves more than 3 messages, we just get to a Google Meet, then we just discuss within 10, 15 minutes, get all the questions answered, then we start doing our work. So it's much faster than just typing messages. And also one thing, one thing in my colleagues in Landscape taught me is that when they always want to do something, I think about the bigger picture, like how will it impact various systems? Because in Landscape, they have a lot of systems that's built in-house and interface with a lot of external systems. So when I build something, I actually think about how it affects the rest of the systems downstream, and also how it affects the rest of my colleagues, because they'll be the ones managing other systems. So if I build something that's actually poses a problem to them later on, then they'll be the ones calling me and telling me something is wrong with my system. Then I have to fix it.
Right. So communication is key. And
yes, correct.
Jumping on calls, keeping your camera on.
yes.
Right. So how did you so what were some significant projects at Lenskart, and how did these projects specifically contribute to the growth and success of the company while they were launching in Singapore?
Okay, so basically some of the significant projects we did was we did an overhaul of their existing site for Singapore, just to be Singapore specific, and also we actually worked with the India team to actually modify the system in India to cater for multiple countries, especially for Singapore, including Singapore, because Singapore was actually basically the base for Southeast Asia for Landscape.
Right.
Yeah, so we had to, I had a lot of communication and calls in my team in India, and my colleagues also in India. They helped me a lot in terms of telling me how do they structure their work, how they structure their code, their architecture. Then from there, I had my developers talk to them and also find out how to actually best optimize our code so that it works well with their code, and also still serves our stakeholders and customers in Singapore and Southeast Asia.
Sounds very interesting. Because looking at it from a perspective of cross-cultural barriers, it's tough to gain success in a completely different culture and having that team there. It's great to see that you've achieved that. Talking about cultures, coming to Mighty Jaxx. So I gathered that Mighty Jaxx caters to a culture that is, prominent in the Web3 space, and it's something that we'll surely see more and more of as we move forward. So I would say the antique typewriters that would cost a lot of money are being replaced by NFTs and digital art. So what led to you joining Mighty Jaxx?
Okay, so actually the time I was Landscape, then actually someone from Mighty Jaxx reached out to me, then asking me whether I want to join them, because they heard about me. Then they actually need a director of engineering to join them to start their team in Singapore and hire developers. So I was Landscape. I told him why don't you just look for someone first? Then you can't find someone, you just come back to me 4 months time. So after 4 months, actually they told me that actually they couldn't find anyone else. They interviewed a few candidates. Then they said why don't I just try and interview with Mighty Jaxx? Right, okay. Then I went for interview with the COO, CTO, and a few of the management team. And then I realized actually this is quite new and quite interesting. And one thing they're doing e-commerce, which what I've been doing all my career, and also they're doing Web3, which is what I was interested in at that time. So I thought this is a good place for me to start my Web3 professional career, because previously I was just doing some hobby projects on Web3 and NFTs, but nothing really professional. So I thought it would be a good idea. So that's why I joined Mighty Jaxx.
Right. And so since you're the director of engineering there, what are your key responsibilities?
Okay, so basically, I inherited a legacy system from some outsourced vendors in Vietnam. So basically, what my key responsibility at the start was basically set up a team in Singapore. And then also, while setting up the team in Singapore, I also had to develop on product initiatives and roadmaps, and also making sure that the legacy system is still stable to support to support our growth.
Right. So as we've come across your career, we've realized that you started as an entrepreneur, I would say. I mean, after your brief stint as a developer, started as an entrepreneur, building your consultancy for almost a decade. And then you transitioned into leadership roles in various tech companies. And might I say that you have shown, as in our conversation, this illustrative aspect of going after ideas that you felt were instrumental. So what would you say are the key factors that have contributed to your success as a leader in the tech industry?
I would say there are a few things. So one thing is be curious. So right now, I'm actually curious about AI and generative AI. So I'm actually learning some development on AI using LangChain, Python, and also open AI APIs. So that's something I'm just doing right now as a just hobbies project on the ends because I'm just curious about it. So previously I was curious about NFTs. Then also I'm always curious about any other thing under the sky. So anything that I like to read about, it could be like system architecture, new databases, that kind of stuff. If I'm just curious, and because IT is always moving so fast, every few years or every few months there's a new framework on or there's new programming language. I'm always curious about this frameworks and language. So I always like spend a bit of time reading about it, doing some homework, doing some projects or some coding just to see how things are. So that actually helped me in my career from being a developer onto a leadership role.
Right. So you're saying that being curious is what's kept you moving and wanting more experiences at various companies. Right.
Yes.
And so you've also mentioned that you've built a lot of tech teams and starting a lot of teams from scratch. What goes into building a successful tech team?
I would say, okay, so from a scratch, I would say having, what people say is always true. Always good to hire you always have to hire the correct people. So for being a tech team from scratch, what I always do is always try to hire at least someone mid to senior level first. Then from the mid senior level, once I hire them, then I can hire junior levels because once I hire mid senior people who have actually experience in working in the company for actually 3 or 4 years, they are able to help to guide junior developers. So I always hire mid senior people. Then after that, I'll hire the more junior developers.
Right. And what do people usually, as you mentioned, you've worked with a lot of people. So what have you seen people miss while they're building their teams?
Okay, I think a lot of people, because in Southeast Asia, it's actually very common for people to actually hire developers in India, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines. So I think a lot of people actually they don't really factor in things like the cultural differences, for example. So even things like public holidays, like some countries different public holidays from Singapore, from India. So they don't factor this in. Communication is so something that don't really take into consideration. So a lot of people think like, okay, I just tell them what to do and then they'll do it for me. But sometimes that is not the way it works when it comes to managing developers. Sometimes you have to tell them like why, or you have to actually dive down into the code and tell them like this way you're doing this way, or the way you're doing your database call is not optimal because of certain reasons. Then you're actually to understand like how they work and also their way of thinking.
Right. And yes, definitely. A culture understanding is important while managing teams across borders as well. And while you're in that same respect for the people that are working with you. Yes. So moving forward, so we have a lot of developers as a part of our rebase community at Recro. And we would love for you to give some advice to these engineers and individuals on how they would advance their careers and scale it.
Okay, so actually that depends on what level. Are they a junior level or mid senior level? So for junior developers, I would say like because they are coming in as a fresh grad from universities or schools, so it's good to have a wide exposure to what they want to do. So because as a fresh grad, you may not know what you want to do as a career. You may you may think that you want to do programming or you want to do like system architecture or DevOps or data analytics. So I would say for for junior developers, try to work in a company where you have exposure to a wide variety of roles, where they give you exposure to maybe doing some data engineering, DevOps, architecture, programming, or maybe even programming can do like web programming or mobile programming. So from there, you actually find out what is your what do you like to do? Do you like to do more data engineering, or do you like to do more mobile development? So from there you actually find an idea of what you want to do in life for your career. Then once you come to a mid to senior level, you may think like, do you like to go into the management role where you manage people and also do some technical development, or you want to prefer more of an IC role where you just focus on just development and tech related stuff, but you don't really focus on managing people itself. So for that, you also need to, I say, experiment between these two lines. Like I know people that actually think that they want to do an individual contributor role, just doing development, but then they find out actually they prefer doing the management and the mentoring of the junior developers role. So they switch over from IC's individual contributor over to engineering manager kind of role, and vice versa. So getting exposure to whatever you want to do can help you shape your career, and then from there you can actually decide where you want to go in life.
Right. And that was some lovely advice for the developers who want to scale their careers in engineering teams. What advice would you have for an aspiring entrepreneurial techie, someone who wants to build their own business like you did?
Okay, so one of the first few mistakes when I first started my company was that I always think that, okay, if I need to charge them a certain amount, and then I need to make sure that I make money and it's comfortable, then I will take on the project. But actually I discovered that for the first few projects do not really focus on the money aspect of like how much you earn and how much profit you make. Just focus on doing a good job. Then once you do a good job for people and they're happy with you, they will actually recommend people, and word of mouth is actually very underrated. People think that word of mouth is actually like it's something that doesn't really work, but I find in my case it's actually it's very useful, and it works for me in my entrepreneurial career. Even now, when I work with vendors from overseas like Vietnam, India, Indonesia, if I have a very good working relationship with them, I think that developers are pretty good. When I go on to a new job and I need some sort of vendors, I'll still go back to the same agency again and ask them like for some development support, because I know that they can be trusted and they can deliver good work.
Right. So moving forward, how do you maintain a work-life balance at such a demanding role?
Okay. So basically for me, basically when I started working more on the leadership position, I was basically spending a lot of time doing development and also doing management and people management. So I found that actually it's not sustainable, because I actually spending a lot of hours after office doing a lot of additional work. So what I do now is actually I try to focus on just either people management or development based on certain days of the week. So what I do is like in the mornings I'll do like maybe some technical work, then afternoons I'll do some of the management work of my job scope. And also what I do is I always set very strict timelines of what I need to do, so that by 6 o'clock or by 7 o'clock I finish my work and then I'll go home. Yeah, I just leave my laptop at home. I leave my laptop in the office. Then only if there's emergencies, then I'll be contactable after office hours. If not, I'll just leave my laptop in the office, then I'll just go back and enjoy myself.
And how do you like to enjoy yourself?
Okay, so basically I like to do a lot of reading, and I also read a lot of technical blogs and articles. It could be things like engineering management, technical leadership, or even some technical articles. Like right now, I'm actually reading some white papers on some new generative AI technologies. So it basically anything that I find interesting on my newsletters, I'll just read it as some sort of leisure.
That's great. And so, as a developer who wants to work at a company like yours, how, as we've learned that just applying and sending out resumes is not enough. So as a leader, how do you find an ideal developer reaching out to you for a job opportunity?
Okay, so this one I would say applies to senior and also junior developers. Like I would like developers to actually have like some sort of hobbies project to show me like what they have done as either as a sideline or as a end project. And also when I look at their code, they explain to me the code. I actually have an understanding of what their thought process when it comes to coding or system architecture. Then I like developers that are actually able to actually defend themselves and ask them like, okay, so for React, why do you use this state management tool instead of Redux? Or why do you why is your code structure in this way? So they are able to give me proper answers so that I know like, okay, how's their thinking like, how's the thought process like when it comes to development. Then rather than just hiring developer who just code and then doesn't tell you anything about how they code and the kind of thing. So I always like developers that have side projects and is able to be a good communicator in terms of explaining their code and their thought process when they're doing development.
Right. And so when you're in an interview with a developer,
Yes.
how are you assessing them? What aspects are you looking for?
Okay, so besides technical aspects, I'll assess them for technical skills and also like the character, like because in the startup, when I always start my tech team, the team is very small. So I want to make sure that people are cooperative and collegial. So they must be able to disagree, but respectfully. They do not get to quarrels over Slack, that kind of thing. So I want people who are collegial, cooperative, and always have a team mindset. That means they are always working. They know that they're always working as a team to finish their project. They are just not people who just work on their own project and that's it. They are not solo developers.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we're coming towards the end of our session here.
Okay.
So Gibson, would just love for some final words of advice you have to budding developers.
Okay, so basically for budding developers right now, it's actually a very good time. Although I know the economy is not very good worldwide in US, India, Southeast Asia, but it's just a temporary phase. So I would say like for now, it's a good time for actually a lot of budding developers to just basically just put your head down, do a lot of coding, learning, getting up to speed with what you want to do. Then once the economic outlook has improved, hopefully next year, then you'll be a better chance to get a good role in any company.
That's great. So thank you, Gibson. It was lovely getting to know you and your journey throughout your illustrative career, I would say, as a sailor, as working in your own company and running your own teams, building your teams from scratch at multiple startups, and now leading a Web3 company as you explore your interests further. This has been a lovely chat, and thank you for enlightening us and giving the words of wisdom.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity.